Right now on Tech Radio, how many eyes in AI?
Hi, I'm Artemis. I am a computer-generated AI voice, and you're listening to Tech Radio.
Every week online and on air with RT Radio, we bring you the latest in tech from Ireland and across the world. You're welcome to episode 1021, looking back on the 7 biggest stories of the week. And so many stories, many Irish, many AI stories to cover, plus a new space centre for Athlone. And with our guest interview, we discover tons about how AI is being used to speed up the diagnosis of age-related vision impairment and blindness. Let's get straight into it.
From techcentral.ie, this is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
I'm Dusty and joined as always by our editor-in-chief, Niall Kitson. Last week we were done up to the nines. We were on a night out, Niall and I, with our monkey suits and our black tie on to attend the Tech Excellence Awards. My first one, and I have to tell you, Niall, I know you've been to many of these and you've run many of these, much bigger events than I was expecting. How many people do we have in the room?
Yeah, I think we had 400 odd people in the room, maybe a little more. Sold out once again. Yeah. Generally tends to sell out every year. We were both looking very dapper.
Very dapper.
But no photographic evidence to
yes,
to back that statement up.
Which is why we can say we were looking so well, because we can't prove it. I have to say, there was a couple of just names that I just wanted to shout out quickly. Shay Byrne, of course, from Radio 1, was the host for the evening. He kept running everything running super smooth and on time, which I always appreciated these things because they can just get delayed like mad. That didn't happen. Also, John Kelleher, I'll say congratulations to. He's been a previous guest on the podcast here. He's from the Adapt Centre. They picked up an award. The co-founder of Ergo, John Purdy, picked up an award as well. And Global Logic's Carmel Owens picked up an award. If you want to find out all of the winners of the night and what they won and why, you can check it out at techcentral.ie. But let's get into the news stories for the week. And there's a lot of it. Oh my God. Let's start with Coimisiún, okay? Because they are kind of taking their online code to the EU. They've been through a whole public consultation space at the moment. And this particular code is going to affect video sharing platforms. And it will make those platforms protect people online.
Well, I mean, this is part of a broader effort, kind of in the mold of the Australian Online Safety Commissioner, where we will basically be able to point to evidence of, okay, look, here is something that wasn't moderated effectively. You're in a lot of trouble over this. It's kind of almost a subset of the Digital Services Act, where you're looking at the wider problems of, you know, whether somebody is just a platform or a publisher and what sort of level of responsibility should be thrown in there and what the legal sanctions should be as well, or rather the commercial sanctions, because that's what these companies respond to an awful lot more than the legal ones, although they will go down the legal route to actually appeal them. As we know this week, actually it was said that the Data Protection Commissioner managed to rein in 1.3 billion in fines from the likes of Meta, from the likes of TikTok, all of which are being appealed through the courts at the moment, but, you know, potentially a nice little revenue stream for the Exchequer. So what is Coimisiún looking at? Well, they're looking at content to do with cyberbullying, self-harm, suicide, eating disorders. I mean, I know there is a massive subculture to do with bulimics, supporting bulimics, and anorexic people supporting anorexic people, and this kind of thing. It's going back years. So this is the kind of thing they're looking at. Also incitement to hatred. God knows there's an awful lot of that out there. Terrorism, sexual abuse, racism, and xenophobia. So that, you know, it's a very broad umbrella. However, what we're looking at also is having more parental controls. Because as we know, yes, you might be able to turn off various things in the back end of your Facebook account, but these things can be very difficult to get to. What we basically want is, you know, as few clicks as possible, that people can understand where these protections are as quickly as possible. You, however, have an issue with this safety code. Tell us what it is.
You want to make me sound like a pervert. That's all you're doing. I do have an issue with this because one of the things, and it sounds quite sensible, right, with putting parental controls is how do you get a kid, I was going to say to prove that they're a kid, how do you get somebody to prove that they are old enough to be exposed to more adult content online? It's part of the whole thing that they're looking at. And they're making proposals to put an age verification measure in place to prevent children from encountering pornography, all right? Which sounds ideal, all right? But the problem that I have is, well, how are they going to implement it? All right? Do you literally have to put some kind of ID or verification, name, address, photo, credit card number, something like that, that will enable you to look at adult content on the internet? Now, when I say that, the first thing you think of course, is, videos and porn and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. But what about, kind of your particular politics? Or what if you're doing stuff online that is not illegal, but you don't particularly want people knowing about it or whatever? What if you don't want your name tied with something? Do you know what I mean? It's a whole, you're completely losing your privacy to a certain extent. So I'm kind of like wondering, how are they going to do that age verification? I don't know how they've done it elsewhere in the world, because I know that they've done this in the in the States. There's been a few stories about it. I think maybe it'll be something where you need to verify your age with some kind of an independent third party. All right. And all it is it gives you a code or some kind of a method where you can go, boom, I'm an adult. But it doesn't say I'm a male adult, a female adult. It doesn't say what country you're in. It just goes, I'm over 18.
Well, I mean, the South Park had a great lampooning of that kind of strategy years ago. It was like the boys were looking at a porn website, and it was just sort of, I click here, I have the address here, I address here. Yeah, I'm over 18. Keep going. It was just just make it as simple as possible to get through, because nobody cares. This actually reminds me of a case to do with video games. And I suppose movies before it as well, where parents basically are like, yeah, I know my kid, I'll get it for them. I trust them to verify their identity. I trust them with the login to this. I trust them with whatever. I trust them to play whatever game it is. And on one level, it's okay. That's pretty good vote of confidence in your parenting skills or your child, your little darling who can do no wrong. However, you are still exposing young people to something they're maybe not ready with, because, the online code, it's not just about, pornography. It's about material that's generally harmful for adults to be exposed to, let alone kids. However, there are numerous criticisms of it already, but not to do with content so much as the technology behind it. So tell us a little bit more about what's going on there.
Yeah, the technology around it, that's another sector altogether. And it wasn't me who was pointing this one out. It was Johnny Ryan at the Irish Council of Civil Liberties, because he is also complaining about this particular code, saying that they hasn't done enough to turn off the algorithms and the recommenders. And essentially what they're saying is kind of all of this content that we see in social media, because you looked at this, we think you look at that, blah, 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 and you're just creating a big echo chamber. There's no way of turning that off. And what they want is to have it turned off automatically, all right, so that you as a human being and an adult can say, well, actually, do you know, I'm happy enough for you to moderate and to decide what it is that I see and stuff like that. So he's been kind of giving it a fair old run in various media throughout the week, because they haven't included turning off of algorithms within the code. However, Commissioner Meán have said in their defence that there's no need for the regulation, because all of that is covered under the Digital Services Act.
So it's basically two sides saying, you're not doing well enough because you're not doing this.
Well, there you go.
It's the same argument, only slightly to one side, slightly lopsided, but it's the same argument.
Because that is the joy and that is the pain in the rear end of our modern society and democracy, where everybody has an opinion and we have to find some kind of consensus in the middle.
Oh, God, that's awful.
Yeah, no, I know. Yes, it's hard.
Dusty Rhodes slams democracy.
Shocker. I think he's disappointed because they would have put that into their submission into Commission Meán, and Commission Meán have just not taken them up on that. And I've been there before, all right, where we've put stuff into they were the broadcasting authority at the time. We've put stuff in and, kind of lots of people go, yeah, that's a good idea. That should absolutely be included. And then when the paperwork comes out, it's not in there. It's really disappointing. But, the process is the process. Kind of speaking of the process, then, another story coming up this week is the EU, our friends many times. They're setting up I've mentioned the Digital Services Act and lots of AI stuff coming with the EU. They are setting up a particular office to look after this. What is that office?
Yeah, well, I mean, it is effectively just the AI office, but... Yeah. I mean, the level of manpower behind it so far, I mean, to me, it sounds reasonably impressive. I mean, it's an office of 140 people that will be working away. And it's one of these things that on one level, it's very impressive that they managed to get something together quickly and that it sounds comparatively well resourced.
Yeah.
However, it's still kind of reactionary because if something like ChatGPT hadn't come along, do you think we'd still be, we'd be looking at it in such urgent terms? Probably not. I'd say we'd be not so much kicking back, but doing a wait and see for what would trouble the AI Act, which of course is this risk-based approach to AI, where we were looking at potentially fairly slow but steady progress in integrating the technology into our working lives, into our daily lives, et cetera, et cetera. Now we're at the stage very, very quickly where people are asking AI to substitute genuine human expertise for something that has been generated by a large language model that may or may not be hallucinating, that may or may not be accurate. Even though it can deliver something in a very confident way, it can deliver absolute rubbish, as you know, as well.
I think that's the line, is that it does deliver it in a very confident way. So it's like anything else. If somebody tells you something and it sounds like they're confident and they know what they're talking about, well, then you believe it. The fact the computer is telling you makes it even worse. But you had I don't understand your thinking on this, all right? Because one of the things you had when we were doing notes for the podcast was what's on the line here with this new AI office, and you kind of think that it's jobs. In what way?
Well, okay, and this overlaps with something that happened during the week in front of the Oireachtas Enterprise Committee, because it was a similar discussion that was being held, and the Oireachtas brought in reps from Microsoft, Amazon, Google, sort of the main players, conspicuous by their absence actually being OpenAI from what I can tell. And Kieran McCurry from Microsoft, who we've interviewed on Tech Central before, said, look, nobody's taking your job tomorrow, but we do need to have guardrails in place because it's likely that in the future technology will come along that might have the capability of taking your job, but doing it badly. And Sasha Rubel from Amazon's AI department was there as well. She had another solution for one of the social problems we were talking about earlier, where she was talking about maybe adding watermarks for AI generated content. So particularly if you were looking at something that might be a deep fake or AI generated art or anything like that, just something to put a little thing on it, just going, okay, look, not by human hands. Yeah, I think that's interesting. How easy it would be to implement is something I'm not sure about. But I mean, if you look at the likes of DALL-E and Midjourney, if you're to sign up for a free account and it comes with the proviso that, look, whatever you produce will have a watermark on it, I'm not sure I see a problem with that.
There was a really interesting story during the week, and it was about AI and stuff like that. And I think it was Facebook made an announcement about the number of accounts and stuff like that that they took off. And it was obviously bad actors with political agendas who wanted to get their point out there, but they took them out before they had 500 or 1,000 friends or connections. And I'm kind of going, how do you get 500 4,000 connections and friends in a number of weeks, like on Facebook. But anyways, one of the things that they were saying that was noticed was that these actors were using AI to generate responses to other people's posts. And what they found was that, so like the AI would look at the whatever the article or the post was, and then it would know the point of view with which it was to reply. All right. So, say the war in Israel and Hamas and Gaza at the moment, all right? It would know, Grant, I'm taking this particular point of view, and this particular person said such and such, so my reply would be boom, all right? What they said they noticed, which I thought was interesting, was that many people saw the AI responses and didn't agree with them, or knew that they were AI, or knew that it was just propaganda. And I think there's something in human nature that when we're looking at an image that's been generated by AI, or even text that's been generated by AI, or certainly AI voices, because YouTube is just full of them at the moment, you can just tell straight away when it's AI. However, that's now, okay? This time next year, the technology could be on a whole other level, and it may be impossible to tell, so we don't know. Yeah, you were saying that the whole thing is reactive, all right? But life is reactive. Government is reactive. Do you know what I mean? And any of these kind of organizations and stuff like that, they're there to regulate, all right? So they have to find out, us humans create the problems and do all the dodgy stuff. Then the lawmakers come in and say, now, come on, lads. Do you know what I mean? And they put the legislation in there, all right? And then 99% of people will do it. But of course, you've always got the bad actors who won't. So it sounds great, like having a watermark on AI content, because most people will put a watermark on it. But then you've got, people who, with nefarious intentions or whatever, they won't put a watermark on it. And actually, the likelihood is more likely that people will believe that it's real because it doesn't have the AI watermark. It's great. Anyway, that's one of
the... Yeah, it is. Yeah. Well, and just to sort of finish on that point, one of the things that Elon Musk said when he took over Twitter, now X, was that he would crack down on content from bad actors by charging whatever it is, $7.99 a month to maintain an account. That's how he would keep free accounts that were spreading misinformation in check. Has it worked? No. It hasn't. It has not worked, because the financial return on getting what you want is probably better than $8 a month. I mean, if you are looking to influence an election, $8 a month for, times 100 accounts just to suck people in and create this honeypot. Yeah. I think that's a pretty good return on investment right there.
Yeah. Yeah. But things are changing. It's not just the regulators who are coming in and trying to make sure that people are doing things right. OpenAI has gone back to work building their next version of the LLM. What are they doing with that? Because they were making headlines during the week.
Well, I mean, months ago, just before Christmas, we had the famous letter signed by 240 tech luminaries saying, let's pause research on this, on AI. We don't know. Look, we're fairly sure we're not going to approach a singularity, but this isn't good. So let's just take a step back and see where we are and see what we should and shouldn't do. OpenAI was not a signatory, because why would they be? They're ploughing ahead with ChatGPT and changing the world as we know it. However, for the next version of GPT, which is ChatGPT 5, OpenAI has said, okay, we're going to establish a safety and security committee. So we're actually going to look at these questions before we release something new to market. And I don't know if this is something they were going to do anyway, or something related to the reality check they had last week when Scarlett Johansson said, you know what, you're not allowed to use something that sounds like my voice because that's effectively me. I don't want you to do that. And it was easier for them to say, sorry about that, and shut down the voice than actually go through a legal process, regardless of win or lose. It just wasn't worth it. So who do you put on this committee? Who is the most responsible person you can put on a committee looking into the actions of a private, they're Microsoft have a ton of money in there, but it's still private. So who is the worst person to put in charge?
I don't know who the worst person. The worst person to put in charge is a civil servant, and the best person to put in charge of it is your own guy. That's what I would say.
No, really? That's what you think?
Absolutely. If your industry is being regulated, okay, you want to be on the regulation board. All right. If somebody is going to start making the rules, you want to make sure that you're the chairman of the rule making authority so that you can direct it as you so need.
Yeah. Okay.
That makes sense. It's not right, but it's the way you got to do it.
Well, yeah, there you go. It's not right. I mean, Meta tried it with a committee that promised to do effectively the same thing. It was an independent committee, and it was designed to be kind of advisory. Same as this. I mean, Safety and Security Committee. How do we make better AI? Who do you put on it? Sam Altman, the CEO, ousted in December, brought back. I mean, there's a book going to be written about that situation because the more I read about it, the more hinky it gets. But I mean, the worst person that you want to put in charge of these things, because, at the end of the day, he'll just say, oh, yeah, comments were made. We took them on board. He'll release it. Something will either not happen, fine, or something awful will happen, and he will issue the will be better statement.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen.
Yeah. Heard it all before. Listen, let's get away from AI and go from AI to fly. All right. We have two stories. One being a space centre in the centre of the country, which I will get to in a second. But first, Dublin City Council are getting into drones and urban air mobility. What are their plans? What are they thinking?
Yeah, well, Dublin City Council has been using drones for a while, but just to refresh your memory, I mean, there are regulations already in place in Ireland for the use of drones. For example, if you have something that weighs more than 1 kilogram, it has to be registered. You have only over 16s can own a drone in that sort of, 1 to 25 kilogram. 25 kilogram, of course, is pro level multi-camera kind of setups. You're not allowed to fly more than 120 meters, which is roughly 400 feet. You might remember a while ago there was a chap taking very impressive drone shots of Dublin, only they were taken at 450 and 500 feet. So they had to be taken down off YouTube. You're also not allowed to operate if you don't have a line of sight, which makes perfect sense. You're also not allowed to operate over military areas or controlled airspace. So all of this stuff makes perfect sense. Now, last year, we were talking about drones as well from the perspective of managing emergency situations. Which is great because you get a good view of what's going on. You'll be able to direct resources more effectively. So now Dublin City Council have come out and said, you know what, we've been using drones for a while. We've been using it for sort of mapping, also inspecting buildings that might be dangerous. Just means we'll be able to fly in and out and not necessarily disturb anything. Of course, yes, they've been used in emergency response. And also accessing hard to reach areas. I mean, if you have a very small drone with a camera in it versus, a 6'8" chap with a torch, I mean, one of them is going to have an easier time sussing the place out than the other. So this is the kind of very good things Dublin City Council has been using drones for. Of course, councils being councils, they've actually decided that, do you know what, maybe we should codify this, what we're doing. So instead of using these, not quite in an ad hoc way, but sort of, let's put some rules in place. Let's put some consistent understanding in place. So the things that they're looking at is how to establish what best practice is. So, if somebody new comes into a job, they've got like a manual that they can refer to. They'll be like, okay, right, yeah, that's cool. Another is to work on safety, trust and compliance for operators, again, to give clarity to what they can and can't do. Then you get into something that's a little bit, for you, it might be a little bit sort of, here we go again, to establish a future of drones steering group. So, a collection of academics and other interests that might look at, okay, well, Here
we go again.
Here we go again. Yeah. And lastly, knowledge sharing, so we can find out what best practices across Europe and maybe even share our own findings. I mean, personally, I was very impressed to see what Dublin City Council have been using drones for. And I think there's an awful lot of buildings in the city that either need refurbishment or, need to be demolished outright. And if you can assess them without disturbing anything inside them and give a proper assessment of the state of the building, I think that's absolutely fantastic.
I've seen drones used for inspecting ESB pylons around the country. So instead of somebody having to go to the pylon and then turn off the electricity and walk up and test everything, or climb up, not walk up, which takes ages, they're able to actually literally fly drones along the line and check each pylon as they're going. And it's so much quicker. Just interesting. I mean, I like that story because it's saying that drones are here and actually they're really useful. And what they're doing is they're maturing their policy, and fair play to DCC for
I think mature is the important word there, because we've seen drones really come into their own in the last few years. I mean, for a while, they were a really nice toy for camera enthusiasts, and that was lovely. And you could race them, and that was great fun. And we had trials like DHL working with Amazon, but DHL wrapped that up and said, look, not for us. They stopped doing drone deliveries in 2021. And you would have thought that, a delivery service that potentially goes to very remote areas would be all over something like this, but no, not interested. In 2016, Domino's did a trial in New Zealand with drone deliveries. That wrapped up, but do you know what? That's actually back. They're trying it again. And then you look at companies like Meán, it's an Irish company, and they do deliveries in certain parts of Dublin, but they also operate in Fort Worth in Texas. So I think, looking at areas that are large enough to be serviced, but, remote enough that drone delivery is a pretty good convenience. I think drones are going to have their moment properly instead of being seen as an accessory.
And just to kind of looking at the difference between generations and stuff like that, my niece is 15, 16, that kind of a proper teenager, right? Very excited because she heard that McDonald's in Blanchardstown at the centre there, we're going to start using drones for delivery. Now, they haven't, but there is some kind of a test going on around there at the moment where they are using drones. But she was like, oh, this is amazing. I can do it on my phone on the app, and the thing will come to the back garden and it'll lower it down, So it's kind of it's interesting. It's expanding out there. I wanted to tell you about a brand new space centre in Athlone, of all places. I think on the border of Athlone, that's common, actually, I think. It's a company called it's a company called Metaversal. They've put in an application to use an existing centre and to change it into a visitor attraction of national prominence in the Midlands. I like it. Very lofty ambition. And what they want to do is they want to make it like a national space centre for Ireland, which will be an interactive museum or an interactive exhibition, if you want to put it that way. They'll have 45 different exhibitions on at any given time. They want to put in some kind of a virtual reality roller coaster that will simulate takeoff. So I imagine it'll be something like a bit of a Disney ride or something like that, where you're on a moving platform and everything of the screens around you. That could be amazing. It reminds me actually of, I don't know if you've heard of this Moonwalkers exhibition in London. Tom Hanks is kind of behind it.
No.
From his role with Apollo 13. But essentially what it is that it's a giant room that is surrounded by IMAX. You've been to IMAX, okay? So you can imagine being in a room with 4 IMAX screens all around you.
Wow.
Okay? That kind of level of thing, and very high resolution footage, all to do with the moon and being on it. So when you're looking at a shot of the moon, this thing is like, kind of 40 foot high or whatever. Do you know what I mean? When you've seen the rocket taking off. And of course, they'd have the sound and everything in there as well. Like you get the big rumble of the engines and all that kind of stuff. Now, that sounds fantastic, but I think that it is held in London. And London is a city of whatever 10 million people, and it's got, 100 million visitors or whatever it is every particular year. Whereas when we think about Athlone, not quite the same numbers. So I wonder if having a interactive museum all to do with space will work there.
Oh, I think so long as it's outside Dublin, I think that's fantastic.
I think it's a great move.
Too much stuff is in Dublin.
Yeah. I think it's absolutely a great move. And that's why I say I wish them the very best of luck with it. Anyways, listen, let's leave it there for now. Niall, as always, thanks for keeping us up to date with the news this week.
You're listening to Tech Radio 2024 from techcentral.ie.
Fighting Blindness is hosting the Retina International World Congress, which is coming to the Dublin Royal Convention Centre after the June Bank Holiday weekend from June 5th to 8th. One of the cornerstone topics which will be discussed is the use of artificial intelligence to speed up the diagnosis of age-related vision impairment and blindness. Dr Tiernán Keenan from the US National Institute of Health, who is a keynote speaker at the Congress, took some time out to chat with Niall Kitson about his work with AI.
Tiernán, a lot of academics, a lot of physicians, a lot of, scientists as well, tend to develop either a hobby horse or an obsession or a particular field that they're particularly interested in pursuing, whether that's through experience or by looking at the general question and deciding that's something they want to devote their career to. You've been looking at age-related macular degeneration. So tell us a little bit about the condition and what attracted you to it.
Yeah, thanks so much. No, that's exactly right. You know, for most of my career now, I've been really concentrating on age-related macular degeneration, or AMD. And I think it was two or three main things that really drew me towards it. I mean, firstly, it still is the leading cause of blindness and vision impairment. And so that would be true in Ireland, in the United Kingdom, in the United States, really all industrialized countries. And then, secondly, it's unfortunately often a pretty severe cause of blindness. It affects the very central vision, the kind of vision we need for, reading, writing, recognizing faces, driving. And sadly, in its advanced stages, that would often cause central visual loss in both eyes. So, so I think it's that combination of being a common and an important form of vision loss that has a big burden on individuals and on society. And then, secondly, on the separate side, it's kind of also, I think, scientifically interesting. There's a lot to know about it in terms of genetics, biochemistry. We know diet's very important. And so I've looked at it from many different angles over the past few years.
Yeah, so you've looked at the biochemical element. You've also looked at the genetic element, if you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people who are fairly familiar with age-related macular degeneration will probably know that it's not directly inherited, in the way that, let's say 50% of offspring might be affected, that kind of thing. So it's not a single gene, but genetics is a large part of it. So it can often tend to cluster in families, and affected individuals will often have, a parent or an aunt or an uncle who's affected. In the past, I'd say, decade or so, there've really been massive strides in understanding it. And there are as many as kind of 30 or more genes that are involved, kind of increase or decrease the risk. But amongst all of those, really, there are two genes, one on chromosome 1 and one on chromosome 10, that really carry a lot of the risk. And so obviously that's helpful for understanding people's risk, but also then it gives us a good idea of how to develop, drug targets and new therapeutics.
Which kind of brings us to where you are now, which is the application of artificial intelligence to understanding more about AMD. So when we're looking at AI, first of all, you have to look at the data set that you'll be using. And I suppose, fortunately, in your case, you've got an entire body of data of various kinds of sources to work with that, of course, wasn't created with the intention of being used as an AI, but you've got an awful lot of longitudinal data dating back to, possibly long before computers were mainstream. So tell us a little bit about the material you've been working with.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. A lot of the data that we're using currently was definitely not kind of created or collected with AI in mind. And actually, that's a good point, because in our future studies, we definitely are much more mindful of that now and collecting data in a way that's kind of AI ready, as it were. But you're right, so I work at the National Eye Institute, part of the National Institutes of Health in America. And, for many years or decades almost, it's been funding and organizing really large multi-center clinical trials. And so one of the best known of that would be AREDS, the Age-Related Eye Diseases Study. And so, for example, that one, it enrolled over 4,000 individuals across America, and it followed them longitudinally, as you say, with really detailed pictures of the back of the eye, collecting all kinds of information about eye disease, about other disease over the course of 10 years or so. And, back at the time, we didn't really have the kind of computing power or the technology to train AI models. But more recently, all of these images that serve their purpose in the clinical trial now have a kind of second life. So we can use them to train models to do all kinds of tasks, some that humans can do, but even some that humans are not really able to do. That's the kind of body of data that we're using. And we can talk more about how to share data, how we're collecting it in a way that's more kind of AI friendly in the future. But that's certainly what we've been working with recently.
That idea of sharing data is, for want of a better word, slightly fraught on account of different regimes across the world. How have you found sort of trying to collaborate overseas? Has it been, made much more difficult through the advent of GDPR? Or have you found it to be, just a pretty good guide rail that once you redact certain kinds of information, everything else is actually very easily obtained and easy to work with?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I totally agree with that. Sharing of data in some ways, it's absolutely essential, looking to the future. But I think there are at least two main things to consider. Like you say, that, GDPR, the regulations, the consent that went into it is one side of things. And then secondly, even if those things are in place, let's say in two different clinics or two different countries, if the data are collected in very different ways, there can be real problems with, harmonizing the data. So, but there are approaches that we used and that others are using. So, for example, federated learning is this paradigm where the data stay where they are, where they were collected behind their firewalls and within their kind of regulatory legislation, etc. But it's the AI model that travels. The model goes to one site and is trained on the data there, and the model moves between the sites, and the data can stay put. And on the harmonization side, there's a lot of NIH and other bodies trying to, as I say, make future data collection more AI friendly. There's other approaches as well. Let's say we use our local data to train a model. Again, the model can move. We can send it to another country, to, maybe to check that it's still going to work on individuals of a different ethnicity or so on. And that way we can get around this problem of the data not being able to move.
That brings up so many interesting points when you're looking at the biochemical element in your work previously, when you were looking at things like diet. This really throws open the scope of your research, really, that you might be able to go, okay, well, how was people's eye health in Ireland between the 1950s and 60s compared to now, and what changed in between? Is this the kind of layering that you might be able to see on your work?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely true. There are, existing studies that track the prevalence and the kind of severity of eye disease like macular degeneration and how that changes over time. We know that macular degeneration, unfortunately, is increasing a lot, but that's, probably mostly to do with just, increased lifespan, which of course is a great thing. But we do know that diet is a really key part of macular degeneration. And unfortunately, it seems that kind of, modern Western diet is really, really bad news for macular degeneration. So, for example, in many Asian countries, Japan, for example, they have much less macular degeneration, particularly much less of the advanced dry kind. So I think we're learning a lot about diet, but I think probably we have more to learn there as well, including the use of AI for that reason. Yeah. Looking
then at the applications of what you're doing at the moment, did you see it informing, say, surgical techniques or drug trials, or all of the above, I suppose? Yes, definitely. All of those. I think it's increasingly going to have a place in all these settings, and hopefully in kind of opening up and democratizing medicine to an extent. For example, the number of people with macular degeneration in Europe is as many as about 70 million or so. So it far surpasses the ability of the number of, ophthalmologists or retinal specialists to be able to be seeing all of those individuals. So I think we do have to think about new infrastructure, also in times and places that are more convenient for individuals. So, let's say if they're able to go to the high street and have some kind of eye imaging, and that,
pass this to the retinal specialist, aided by AI at a central center rather than people having to attend the hospital so many times. Drug trials, definitely, we know that using AI can kind of personalize outcomes in drug trials to make the trial either more highly powered, or it can be, shorter and smaller and therefore less expensive than it would otherwise have needed to be. And surgery definitely as well. So there's definitely increase in use of robotic surgery in orthopedics, including in ophthalmology. And as I say, these kind of like real-time heads-up displays with detailed imaging and AI applications of that imaging in real time. But I think we still are right at the beginning of this. So there's a couple of examples now where we're seeing AI in kind of mainstream use. For example, screening of individuals with diabetic retinopathy in the United States. There's FDA approval for a totally autonomous AI device built into the cameras. But there's only 2 or 3 examples. We're still right at the beginning of this, I think. Yeah.
So the next time we go to the ophthalmologist for our 2-yearly check-in, the data that we're creating might end up in a slightly, a greater use, if you will.
Yeah. And provided that, I think the consent part of it is really important. So, making sure that patients and individuals and citizens are right at the center of this, I think is crucial. But yeah, I think increasingly there will be the option for us to have this kind of data collected as a byproduct of the normal care we're getting, but with this second incentive that hopefully we're improving care for the future as well.
That was Dr. Tiernán Keenan from the US National Institute of Health. To find out more about his work at the Retina International World Congress happening after the weekend and Fighting Blindness, check out their website, www.fightingblindness.ie. That, of course, in the show notes for you as well.
This is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
That's it for our show this week. Do check out some more stories we have online, including Niall.
Yeah, we've got Galwegians getting a new view of the county through a little project called Story Maps. We have the first Irish patient to be implanted with a cardiac monitoring device from Fire One. And National Broadband Ireland celebrates another milestone in its network rollout.
You will find all of those stories and more online, as always, at techcentral.ie. We're back again next Friday with a brand new show online and with RTE Radio 1 Extra. In the meantime, please remember to share our podcast with a friend who's into tech. Just tell them to look up Tech Radio Ireland on Apple, Spotify, or now on YouTube. Until next time, from myself, Dusty Rhodes, and from Niall Kitson, have a fantastic June Bank Holiday weekend. Talk to you soon.
Remember, you can get the latest Irish tech news with hourly updates, daily newsletters, and more at our website, techcentral.ie. Share the knowledge and invite a friend to listen. Search Apple, Spotify, or YouTube for Tech Radio Ireland, or listen with RTE Radio 1 Extra. Tech Radio is produced by dustpod.io for techcentral.ie. From me, Artemis, live long and prosper.